Two men in fake badges stormed into a millionaire's backyard, demanding he leave his own pool. They thought they could intimidate him with their so-called HOA authority. But what they didn't know was that this wasn't just any homeowner. With one brilliant move, he exposed them for the frauds they were and destroyed their entire operation. On the edge of town sat a sprawling estate with a crystal blue pool, perfectly cut hedges, and a long driveway lined with oak trees. The house belonged to David Carter, a self-made millionaire. David grew up with nothing, no silver spoon, no easy road. But through grit, intelligence, and a few bold business decisions, he built a tech company from scratch and retired in his early 40s. For David, his home was more than wealth. It was a reminder to his children that success was possible despite where you start. But to the HOA of Willow Lane, David was an outsider, someone they couldn't control. And they hated that. The Willow Lane HOA was notorious. They fined families for leaving trash cans out a minute too long. They forced homeowners to repaint shutters if the color faded, but with David it was personal. They complained about the number of cars in his driveway. They accused him of unauthorized landscaping. They even questioned whether his pool was up to neighborhood standards. David paid no mind. His estate was privately owned and not even under HOA jurisdiction. But arrogance can be blinding, and the HOA president, Stanley Briggs, refused to accept that he had no power over David. So Stanley escalated. One sunny afternoon, David was relaxing by his pool, sipping iced tea, when two burly men in black uniforms marched through his gate. Badges flashed. Radios crackled. They looked the part of law enforcement. "Sir," one barked, "you're in violation of HOA code. This pool is not authorized. You'll need to vacate immediately." David raised an eyebrow. "This is my pool, my land." "You have no jurisdiction here," the man smirked. "We're the HOA Enforcement Division. You either comply or face serious consequences." Neighbors peeked over fences, watching the confrontation. To them it looked like real cops. But David's sharp eye caught details others missed. Badges that looked cheap, uniforms with no official insignia, radios that weren't even turned on. They weren't cops, though they weren't even HOA officials. They were imposters. David didn't argue. He didn't shout. Instead, he calmly pulled out his phone. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "why don't we verify your credentials? I'll just call the real police and have them sort this out." The men stiffened. "That won't be necessary. Just leave the property." But David was already dialing. What's your emergency?" "Yes, I have two men impersonating officers on my property. They're trespassing and making threats." The imposters paled. One tried to snatch David's phone, but he stepped back, his voice calm as ever. Too late. "They're already on their way." Minutes later, sirens wailed. Real squad cars pulled into David's driveway. Officers stepped out, hands resting on holsters. "Sir, what seems to be the issue?" David gestured toward the imposters, who were now sweating bullets. "These men claim to be HOA enforcement. They ordered me out of my own pool." The officers turned to the fake cops. Badges now, the imposters fumbled. Their cheap badges glinted under the sun. Within seconds, the officers had them in cuffs. "Impersonating law enforcement is a felony," one officer said coldly. Neighbors gasped. The so-called HOA cops were nothing but frauds. As investigations unfolded, the truth spilled out. The HOA Enforcement Division didn't exist. Stanley Briggs, the HOA president, had hired these men to intimidate David. He thought if he couldn't control David legally, he'd scare him into submission, but his plan backfired spectacularly. With evidence from David's security cameras, every second of the imposters marching in, flashing fake badges and threatening him, Stanley's little scheme crumbled. Lawsuits followed. Stanley was forced to resign. The HOA faced investigations for harassment, and the imposters, they faced years behind bars. David didn't celebrate with champagne or victory speeches. He simply went back to his pool, stretched out under the sun, and smiled. He hadn't needed wealth, lawyers, or security to win. Just one simple, brilliant move, calling the real cops. The same neighbors who once whispered about him now saw the truth. David wasn't a man to be pushed around. He was a man who stood his ground with intelligence, calm, and dignity. Arrogance makes people believe they can bully, intimidate, and control others. But real power doesn't come from threats or fake badges. It comes from truth, courage, and the calm strength to expose lies. The HOA thought they could take down a millionaire with force. Instead, he destroyed them with one simple move: the truth.